What is the creepiest and most unexplainable paranormal experience you've ever had? Not me, but a friend of mine told me about a dream she had years ago about a decrepit old man who was being chased by wolves. In the dream, he kept referring to himself in the third person as Old Skin. Old Skin's gotta get away from the wolves eventually. The wolves caught up to him and started ripping him to pieces in front of her, and he kept narrating the events in a monotone voice. Old Skin's being eaten alive, Old Skin's gonna die. She woke up feeling creeped out, but the weirdest part came when she started describing the dream to her brother. He stopped her mid-sentence and asked, was his name Old Skin? I had the exact same dream. I don't know if that counts as paranormal, but it's fucking creepy. When I was in elementary school, I shared a queen-size bed with my older sister, and our family dog, a mutt that looked like a short-haired lassie, would sleep at the foot of our bed every night. When I was about 6 years old, I woke up one night around midnight and saw a dark figure standing at the foot of the bed. The figure was entirely in black without any eyes or a face. I tried to wake my sister up, but she rolled over to go back to sleep. My sister must have accidentally kicked the dog, because the dog woke up and raised her head and started growling at the figure at the foot of the bed. The growling then woke my sister up, and she saw the figure and started screaming. When my parents came into the room and turned the light on, nothing was there. To this day, both my sister and I are adamant that we saw a ghost or other demon in our room. We know we aren't crazy because the dog saw it too. I woke up to a tall dark figure that was standing a foot from my bed too. Except it did have bright, human-like eyes in contrast with its dark body. I don't know how long it was there while I was asleep, but even though I was unconscious, I somehow became aware that I was being watched. The feeling of being watched was very intense. So I opened my eyes, sat straight up, and stared directly at it. We stared at each other for what seemed like a long moment. I might be sounding crazy, but I felt like it wanted me to know it was there, and it was gauging my reaction towards it. It occurred to me that under different circumstances I probably would have been scared upon suddenly seeing a dark unknown shadow, but in reality I was too tired to care. I didn't dare blink until it dissipated away like smoke. Then when the heavy feeling of being watched finally went away, I lied back down and immediately went back to sleep. Not a scary ending, but it was a memorable moment for me. This story was related to me through a friend, but someone he knew moved into a flat, and over the 3 or 4 years he was there he would see a black figure at the foot of his bed. Apparently when he'd come home drunk, if he woke up and saw it he'd yell at it and tell it to fuck off. It's always creeped me out. I was also told that after a time they broke down a cupboard door. The flat was above a shop that was always locked, and they found a noose. This part always seemed a bit unrealistic to me, but seeing a black figure at the foot of your bed sounds scarily common. My grandmother suffered from heart problems and worsening dementia after my father passed away, as they were very close. After a few years staying in a nursing home, she could just remember who we were, and that was about it. If you came and ate breakfast with her, she would have forgotten the entire event by lunch. Anyways, one night we get a call that my uncle who lived in the next state over had committed suicide. We waited a few days until a good day, when she was more mentally stable, to visit Granny and break the news. We get there and start some small talk, but before we get to the subject at hand she says, deadpan, well I guess Jeff, her youngest, is the only one left. We ask her about it and she tells us that Terry, the son we came to talk about, had shot himself. Mind you, he lived in a different state and none of the family back home had any of the details yet and had no idea how he had done the deed, just that he had died. We asked a little bit more and she basically told us that Uncle Terry had called her a few nights ago and told her he had just shot himself in the head. We later, nearly a month, learned that he did in fact shoot himself in the head. So, either my uncle's ghost has better phone service than I do, scary, or he was still conscious immediately afterwards and was able to make a call, horrifying, or he called her just before killing himself to say goodbye, absolutely depressing, and she interpreted it wrong, but managed to remember it all the same. When I was a kid, my brother and I would get stuck with babysitting the neighbor's kid. His name was Alex. Alex was really fond of my Lego set that I had in the corner of my room, facing the window. He would play for hours, staying preoccupied, while my brother and I would play video games in the living room. So one night, when I fell asleep on the couch while babysitting, my brother came to me and said, Alex is under your bed and shaking. I asked, what's wrong with him? My brother told me to follow him into the room and try to talk him back out from under the bed. I go inside to find him on the verge of tears as he was trembling profusely under my bed. I asked Alex, what's wrong? Why are you under there? Alex whimpered it while looking at my sliding closet. As I walked toward the bed, in order to help him out, he ran. He ran all the way back over to his house and waited on his front steps until his parents got home. Now, my parents were out to dinner with his, and he explained the whole story in detail to both his parents and mine. His explanation sent shivers down my spine when my brother and I left the house to meet up with his parents and find out what happened. My mom told me that Alex was playing with my Legos and hear a slight murmur from my closet, something that resembled a faint vocalization of, come here. He said that he looked behind him and noticed the closet had a slight opening with light peering in from my lamp. He stared at the crack until he saw an eyelid open. He told us that there was a man in my closet. Alex then hid under my bed after he gave out a slight yelp, which attracted my brother's attention. My family rushes back into my house and into my room. In horror, we find my closet door rocked open. My window had been left open when it was previously closed and a few things knocked over which had not been touched previously. We still don't know what force we were reckoning after that evening. Thank God nothing more severe happened. I saw my deceased ex-husband in my kitchen. I was watching TV in my living room in the middle of the day and kept hearing the sound like someone was jiggling their change around. And it was loud, as if it were in the room with me. I paused my TV, yet the sound persisted. So I start to look around the room, and when I got to the kitchen, I saw him standing there. He was looking around, as if taking stock of my apartment. Oh, and he was jiggling change in one hand, while flipping a quarter in between his fingers with the other hand. Something he did a lot when he was alive. He turned his head and saw me frozen, staring at him. The expression on his face was new. I would never forget. His eyes got huge, and he kind of tilted his head forward with the expression like, "You can see me?" I don't know how long we stared at each for, but I turned away when I started to hear my cat ripping up the fucking carpet again in the other room. When I turned back to my ex, he was gone. It's worth noting that he had only been dead for a couple months too. Some Romanian women I worked with told me that the dead stick around for 3 months before crossing over. I don't know about all that, but I know without a shadow of a doubt what I saw that day. When I was about 16 years old, I encountered something that still bugs me to this day. I woke up around 6 a.m. on a normal weekday and went downstairs to get ready to school. No one else in my family had woken up at this point. I got in the shower, still sleepy and could barely hold my eyes open. After a few minutes of showering, someone tried to get it and I told whoever it was that I was in the shower. The person then proceeded to aggressively open the door. I saw the door handle going up and down like crazy, and he or she whatever knocked on the door harder and harder. And then it suddenly stopped. Didn't think that much about it, but when I got out of the shower I realized that nobody was up yet. I proceeded with eating breakfast. And after a while my dad came down the stairs, so I asked him if it was he who had wanted to use the bathroom earlier. He said no, and that both my mom and younger brother was still asleep, so it could have not been them either. And even if it had been any family member, they would not have tried to open the door so aggressively at 6 in the morning. When I was a kid, about 7 to 8 years old, I was on my way to the park. It was in the middle of day in the middle of summer, but as I open the gate I freeze, as I hear a very creepy voice whisper my name in the distance. I look around. No one within sight, and I live in the middle of town, small town. Then I hear it again, but this time closer. Still frozen on the spot, still scouting for the source of the voice. Then, I hear it again, but this time, right in front of my face. I immediately unfreeze, sprint back inside, and hide under my desk, shaking like crazy. I never went outside that day. I was a rookie cop when my brother committed suicide. He was one of my older siblings, but we were very close. He died in another state, and I had a lot of guilt then about not recognizing the signs. His remains were in bad shape by the time he was discovered, so it was a closed coffin service. About a week after he died, I was back at work one night, and my partner and I see a pimp pistol whipping one of his girls. I jump out and the pimp sees me, and the foot chase was on. I was running after him, gun in hand, and he cuts through a narrow corridor under a building that leads to a courtyard in the middle. Right before I reach the courtyard, I hear "It's okay" in my dead brother's voice. I hit the courtyard and the guy is against the side pointing a gun at my head and squeezes the trigger twice. I froze for a millisecond and then started beating him in the head with my revolver. Till this day, I don't know why I didn't just shoot him. Cuff him and walk him back to the street and find my partner. I tell my partner about him squeezing the trigger, but not the voice I heard. We unload the gun .32 revolver, right there, and 2 bullets have strike marks on them. Take the gun to the lab for testing. Tell the tech the story. He puts the 2 bullets with strike marks back in and shoots into the test tank. Both bullets fired. I was home last year during a break from university with a friend, and we decided to go see a friend in a different city in his university. It was a small city with rivers, hills and forests. At night we decided to go in a nearby forest to smoke and drink by a river, but still being on main road. So, we were standing with our car, parked, and I was drinking, and both of them were making joints and smoking. It was about 11 in the night and dead dark with no lights or people for several kilometers. We had been standing there for about an hour when a 25 to 26-year-old guy came out of tree line and came to me, talks to me, and says this place is not safe at night. You guys should go from here. My friend who used to study there heard me talking to someone and started walking towards me, but stopped right there. His face went white and told me to get in car and that we are going. I told the guy thanks and goodbye and turned the car around. For 10 minutes my friend didn't talk, and when we were out of the forest, he finally broke his silence and told me that this guy who was talking to me was a boy from his university who died on the same road 2 years back in an accident. We were so scared that we didn't go home that night and spent the rest of night getting high nearby a river.